Welcome to After Hours with your host, Cans.
Well, thank you, Shelley. That's a quite nice intro. That was awesome. As you can tell, we did a little bit of behind the scenes work. Got the Beast TV production crew helping me out with some voiceovers. So as I mentioned last time, it's kind of an evolving deal. So as we go on, we'll have some little bit of change here, a little bit of change there. It's not going to be exactly like Mark's channel always, but we aim to give the audience what they want. And with that in mind, tonight's guest, you'll probably know him from his recent appearance on Bigfoot Odyssey, as we all know and love that show. But Kyle Connolly is from Groton, Connecticut. He's had a couple experiences in the Berkshires when he was younger, I think around the age of 14. He was out on a camping trip with his family. And another experience in the Bridgewater Triangle. We'll discuss that a little bit this evening also. And get an opportunity to talk about his background, maybe some of his relatives and what they know about that area, or some legends that have been passed down from some of the people that immigrated from that area, from where his family was back in Ireland. So with that said, we want to bring on tonight's guest, Kyle Connolly. Kyle Connolly.
Yes, sir.
Now, you're Irish Catholic, is that right?
Absolutely.
Right, and a lot of your family then is from the Northeast?
Yeah, the majority of my family lives here. We have some relatives kind of scattered about other places, but most of us live up here. The Irish part of my family lives mostly in South Boston.
Great. And where did you grow up? You grew up right around there in Connecticut?
Yeah, I grew up on the shoreline, southeastern Connecticut, in London County. Nothing really big and famous about this area except for the shipyard here in Groton, Electric Boat, that produces a lot of the nuclear submarines. And then we have Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun are about 15 minutes away from me.
Gotcha. So now, how does someone growing up on the East Coast, close to the water, very populated area,
Mm-hmm.
How does someone from that part of the country kind of get interested in Bigfoot? Because when we talked on the pre-show, you'd had an interest in monsters from a young age, right?
Sure, yeah. When we were little, we didn't have a ton of money. My father left my mom when I was just a baby, and then she remarried. But just like many young couples, my mom, my stepdad struggled, so we didn't have a ton of money. So for fun, we would go to the library and get to pick out books and 50-cent movie rentals back then. And any time that I went, I just went to the same aisle every time, directly to same books. I would take them out every single time, over and over. It was the vampires, it was the Loch Ness Monster, it was the UFOs, and then eventually saw Patty for the first time in one of those books, and was just kind of like a lot of other people, where you just kind of are going, man, if that's real, that's very cool.
And so, moving forward, after you've had that interest, said you had a kind of middle class upbringing, not a lot of money, not super rich, anything like that. You weren't going to any stay away camps, overnight camps for 2 weeks or anything like that up in the Adirondacks or anything like that.
No, sir.
And so you guys, for a family trip, you'd go out to the Berkshires?
Yeah, so it varied, but generally, yeah, like a camping trip was basically what we would do for a good vacation. And the Berkshires was one of the places because it was close by. It was it's about 2.5 hours, maybe 3 from here. So it was close enough to drive to. It was either there or Vermont is generally where we went. And October Mountain and Mount Greylock were the two places that I remember the most that we would go camping at.
Okay. And what was the name of that mountain again?
October Mountain and Mount Greylock.
Okay. And that's where you had your encounter, correct?
Yes, sir. October Mountain was where we had it.
Okay. And you'd been out there how many times before this encounter?
I would say probably 5, maybe. Mm-hmm. Five times before this. Yeah.
So you've been going there since you were what, 8, 9 years old?
Yeah, about that. Yep.
Okay. And what was the appeal? You said you didn't go to any type of campgrounds or anything like that. You were kind of in the back country, kind of off the beaten path, if I remember.
Yeah. So, one of the things that our family friend Chris, he had a background. He was in the military. He was a really like a tough guy. Even in his 60s to this day, he's a tough dude, and he had wilderness training, and he was familiar with rough terrain and all that kind of stuff. He could read maps really well, and so it was fun for him to take us on these kind of adventures, not down the regular beaten path, to say, you know what I mean? You could go to the campground and you could go down the trails that everybody went down, and that was cool, but it was fun for him to try to plan out these little hikes into places that were a little bit deeper into the woods, and that's what he did. We kind of were in a little secluded area off a old road, parked the campers back to back, set up a little area next to them where we would cook at, and kept the food and had the radio and some chairs and that stuff. We usually ended up setting up a tent somewhere off into the tree line, into the woods a little bit, just in case we wanted to go sleep in a tent and rough it, so to speak. We were kids. We wanted to play, and that
Sure.
That was kind of the idea.
And the parents probably kept you away from the parents, and they were like, yeah, you guys go over there for a while.
Sure. Yeah. Anything to get us away, right? Stop bothering them.
Well, you had mentioned also that as you were growing up, you were always out in the woods. So this wasn't unfamiliar to you. This wasn't like you leaving the city and kind of going out to an area that you weren't familiar with, or, that was something that was unknown to you. No.
So we, my grandparents, behind their house, there was a pretty decent, patch of forest. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was, enough for a kid. Like it was a pretty big area. So we would be out there when I'd be at my grandparents' house, which was every weekend. I spent every Friday night over there, and most of the day Saturday, if not all day and Saturday night. That was every weekend. And even at our house, down the road, there was a place, it was like a pond, and the pond had woods surrounding it. So these are the places that we would play as kids. We'd take our bikes back there, and we'd try to make little paths and jumps, and there were vines that we'd try to swing over the swamp, and end up falling in. Your mom would get mad at you because you come home soaking wet and
sure,
stinking like swamp juice. But yeah, I lived in the woods, man. I loved it. I love animals, so anytime I could get out there and look for baby turtles or snapping turtles or snakes or salamanders, I was happy.
Perfect. Well, okay, then let's go back to the year you were 14,
mm-hmm.
The year you had your encounter. You had gone out there, same area you'd been there before. Just kind of walk us into it. You said you'd had everything set up,
mm-hmm.
trailers back to back, so people kind of vision the area where there's nobody around other than you guys. There wasn't other people camping.
No, not by us. No, not
Okay.
where we were. It's just us.
Just tell me what happened.
So the first night, like I said, the campers were kind of parked back to back like this, at an angle towards the woodline. Um, on the woodline side is where we set up the chairs, kind of in a semicircle. A couple coolers, stuff to cook with. Fire pit was out there. Radio. And we did what everybody else did. We sat out there. We listened to the radio. Chris's family had a little dog. We'd play with the dog. Me and his son, he was a few years younger than me. We would take our flashlights and we would kind of go into the tree line and look around. And sometimes we'd play, tag or whatever it was. But so the first night we were sitting out there, and we had just finished eating, or some people were still eating, but something landed right by the camp, right by like my dad and Chris's feet. You heard a thud, and I guess it was just kind of ignored. But after it happened a few more times, probably 4 or 5 more times, you couldn't be ignored anymore. And so that was when Chris got up and started looking in the woods, using our flashlight and shouting, if there was anybody out there messing around, they need to stop. I don't know if they thought in the beginning that, maybe it was acorns or something. I think a lot of people brush this stuff off and you don't know that there's a possibility that there's something out there. But it was pretty obvious that after a little while, this was not just something falling out of the trees. I mean, you could hear whatever it was coming on a trajectory through the trees. You could hear it hitting leaves on the way in, and the weight of it when it landed on the ground. You just knew it wasn't something natural. And so Chris yelled, and it stopped, and that was all that happened the first night. But when we went to bed, we had left out the coolers and stuff, and the next morning we woke up. One of the coolers had been gone through, and there was a jar in the cooler, a jelly jar, like peanut butter and jelly, but there was a jelly jar. The old glass ones, pretty big, and the top had been taken off, and nothing had been taken out of it, but the top had been unscrewed and just put back on the cooler. Another thing that was kind of brushed off and blamed on something else. Maybe a couple drunks from the area were, driving around or hiking around and came through, or maybe it was some hillbilly or something. That's what the parents were talking about. As a kid, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't even cross my mind that it could have been something different. The next night, same thing. We were sitting out there listening to the music. We were grilling, fire was going, and we heard what we thought was Chris's dog in the woods. I mean, it sounded like it was probably 30 or 40 yards into the woods. And so that kind of startled his wife. She jumped up and she freaked out. She's like, oh my God, where's the dog? He's in the woods. Dog wasn't in the woods. The dog was sitting right next to Chris on the ground. But it sounded indistinguishable. I mean, it was, whatever it was the perfect mimic of this dog. But again, just one more thing that was blamed on a normal, natural occurrence. Could have been somebody else's dog. There could be other people around hiking out here. I mean, just because they weren't around us in that area doesn't mean that you couldn't get to us. You could. You would have to try. It's not like we were out in the Antarctic, but you could get to us if you wanted to. So it wasn't out of the question that it could be somebody, but it still didn't seem, now it doesn't seem plausible. More rocks came into the camp that night. just before most of us went to bed is when that happened. And it was only a couple. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was maybe 2 or 3. So we went to bed that night, and Chris was woken up. His whole family was, but Chris was woken up because he said that it felt like a car had bumped into the camper, but it was loud. Like, I guess if a car had maybe rolled slowly and bumped your camper, he said it shook like that, but there was a very loud bang on the camper. He got up, half dressed, grabbed his gun, came flying out the door, walked around, and searched the perimeter. Said he walked all over the place and didn't see or hear anything. He didn't yell, didn't use the gun that night, but it shook him up. When him and my dad talked the next day, like, you could tell it was pretty unnerving to him, because I think at that point is when you have a hard time. You have a hard time explaining that one. Like, there's not really a whole lot of natural things that can occur that make a whole camper violently move and make such a loud noise. I didn't hear it, but we were in our own camper. My mom always kept music going for me. I was a terrible sleeper. I still am. So we always had a radio going. So the next day we had a hike planned into the woods, and Chris had it all planned out, mapped out where we were going to go. We were going to hike through this certain area, a couple of ridge lines, hills, I guess. I know people say ridges, but these were just kind of big hills. The one on the right hand side was more of a ridge line. The one on the left was just kind of a bigger hill that kind of stretched down a ways. But we were going to hike down through them. It came to a turn, and then there's a pine forest, and then beyond the pine forest there was supposed to be this like stream waterfall area, just a real cool place to go. We thought it would be nice for the kids and something neat to see.
So that you were doing this all after everything that had already happened. You still were like, nobody really thought too much about it. He'd already pulled a gun out.
Yep.
Been frightened, had some activity around the camp. Things had been messed with. The side of the camper had been hit. And this guy was, from what you were telling me, he's ex-military.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a unit that was he wasn't your average Joe.
No.
In for 4 years and out. He had some pretty, high level experience.
He was, he was, and I might not. I was 14 at the time, so I'm not exactly sure. I know he had some kind of like sniper training at one point, and I believe he was part of some kind of like Marine recon unit. Just
Sure.
some bad dudes who knew what they were doing. They were sent in to handle special missions. That's all I knew. I mean, I looked up to this guy. I thought he was the coolest thing ever. As a kid, like,
Okay, so yeah, and
G.I. Joe.
In the middle of the night, then you see him jumping out of.
I didn't see it.
Okay, now then did you? Then that night, I mean, what was going through your mind? You said you heard the rocks, saw the rocks, and now that happens. Were you awake when he jumped out in the middle of the night and was going around the camp?
Nope.
Okay.
Didn't hear anything. Didn't find out any of that until the next morning when he talked to my dad. And the reason that I even stuck around to listen is because the way that he approached my dad made me feel really nervous. He wasn't a guy who led on to being scared about much of anything, but he grabbed my dad like, we need to talk. One of those type of things. And they kind of went off by themselves, having a very quiet conversation so the wives didn't hear. But I was a pretty slick kid. I knew when something was going on. And so sure. I made my way as close as I could to listen. And And that's what I heard. They ended up, his wife was in the camper with him, so she woke up. He just didn't want to discuss that. He thought it was something,
Gotcha.
weird around them. He didn't want to panic her, basically, is what it was.
And you didn't, you guys weren't thinking it was Bigfoot at the time. You didn't know what was going on. So you weren't checking for tracks. You weren't looking at, any type of evidence for what might have been going on.
No, even though I had an interest as a child, right? Like I would go to those books and your imagination would kind of get going. I never really, I was still too young to kind of, to really think that this could be a possibility. Do you know what I mean? Like it was a cool thing to think about, but it just didn't seem like it could really be a possibility. I was too young to ever even put any gravity to that subject, and so no, there was no thought about it, at least from me, and I doubt from them because they're pretty old school guys. Like my dad's very quiet, reserved. He's pretty OCD about everything, right by the book, and so I highly doubt that he ever gave a thought to anything like that.
Okay, so that's the feeling that you've got. Now you're getting ready to go on out on this hike. What did you notice any different type of vibe or tone in this Chris or your dad when you guys started going on this hike? Because from what you said, it was just the four of you, right? You, Chris, his son, and your stepdad. Right?
Yep, that's it. Just us. Okay. The lady stayed back. Chris's daughter stayed with them. She was really young at the time. I think she was like 4, maybe.
Okay.
So it was just us, just the guys, and that was usually how it was anyway, because they didn't want to come hiking in the woods, getting all dirty and whatnot.
Okay.
I didn't notice any different vibe. Like we went on the hike, everybody seemed pretty okay. Like, go about your day. Whatever they discussed earlier, I think that either they were pretending it was okay, or they really just were like, let's go on this hike and forget about what happened.
All right. Well, tell me about the hike.
So it was a pretty decent hike to where we were trying to go to. I would say if we got there, if we fulfilled the whole hike, it would have taken around maybe 15 minutes, between 10 and 15, about. But so we start to hike out, and we're sandwiched between these two hills, ridge lines, whatever, kind of like a little valley, gully kind of area. I would assume that that if it rained hard enough, that there would be water in the center. At least it looked that way. But that's what we were following. And so as we're walking, everything's pretty normal in the beginning. But after about 3 or 4 minutes, it got really quiet, was kind of the first thing that was noticed. You didn't hear any more birds. You didn't hear any bugs. It just got really silent. And not enough to make anybody think anything still. But I would say maybe about 5 or 6 minutes into the hike now, the ridgeline on the right-hand side is pretty tall at this point. Like, because when it started, it started low and kind of built its way up. So that one's pretty high. We start hearing noise coming from the top of the ridgeline. Just a lot of ruckus, just randomly. Some sticks breaking, nothing major, but just sticks breaking, shuffling, what sounded like walking, on 2 feet. Is what it sounded like. And then we heard a snap. Oh, actually, prior to that, another rock landed behind us as we were walking. 1 or 2 did. I only remember the one, but I remember my dad and Chris discussing that they had heard at least two. So then we heard this stick break from on the top of the ridge that was so loud. It was like it's so hard to describe. It had to have been a green tree, and it had to have had some girth to it, because it was not just a snap. It was like a crack, 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 and the last of those was just echoed. Like, it was so loud. That's when I think the gravity of the situation started to set in to the dads.
Well, how long had you been hearing that up on the ridge?
Oh, a couple minutes.
Okay.
So it had been going on for a couple minutes, yeah. Like I said, this is a pretty long hike. Right. It was, it was about 8 to 10 minutes to when we get to what happens.
Okay. And you'd had rocks thrown while you guys were on the trail, kind of back behind you a little bit.
At least a couple. Least a couple.
Okay. And then the stick break?
Then the stick break or tree. I don't know. Okay. I've never heard a stick break that sounded like that. Okay. Not that I could break anyway, or any human man that I know. So that's when Chris pulls out his pistol again. He had verbalized a little bit, like, to, like, if there was somebody out there to stop messing around. But when that happened, he pulled the pistol out. Then he started cursing up a storm. He was mad. He was angry, and I think it was because he was scared.
Okay.
And he was saying that he has this gun. He'll use it to protect these kids. He doesn't care who you are. They come first. Basically, that whole spiel. Kind of hollered at them that he knew what he was doing with it. He was trained with it, and he wouldn't miss. It's basically what he was saying. It's what he was saying. After he pulled the gun out, that was when all hell broke loose up there. It sounded like a football team. Like there was 10 or 12 200 to 300 pound men just charging through the woods at the same time. It was so loud. It was chaos, and it was terrifying, because there's just no animal out there that sounds that way. There's not even a herd of animals, I think, or a pack, at least in this area, that would make that type of commotion in such a heavily wooded area. We could see nothing. You couldn't see anything.
How far away?
You could see the trees moving. How far away?
Yeah.
So I would say the top of the ridge was maybe 60, 70 feet high, 50, 60, 70 feet high. I'm kind of guessing. I was 14, so it's a little difficult,
That sounds pretty close.
It was close. It was close enough to where you could feel the reverberations in the ground. You could feel it. You could physically feel the movement, like kind of vibrating down the side of this ridge and into the ground under your feet.
And at this time, what's your dad doing?
He's about as white as a ghost. Him and Chris are kind of doing the dad look back and forth, where they're not saying anything, but they're saying everything with the way that they're looking at each other. I don't know if you've ever seen your dad try to tell one of his buddies something that's not, if you've ever been in a sticky situation at all, and your dad knows it and he doesn't want to verbalize it, that look is the look that I saw on his face. It scared me. My dad type of guy who never let on to any emotion ever. If he was ever scared, you didn't know it. To me, he was the toughest guy in the world, and so when you see him like that, it has this effect on you, especially as a child. He's like Superman, like most people's dads are to them. If you're lucky, my biological father was not that guy, but luckily my stepdad was an amazing man. And so to see him look vulnerable for the first time was a pretty scary thing for me.
And you've had years of perspective now to kind of look back on that. But
Yeah.
when you're in the moment, I mean, kind of start from where we're at now, and this is where it kind of kicks off. I mean, everything just starts getting out of control, for a better lack of a description.
Yeah, the volume was at about a 4. Now it's about a 12. That noise and that commotion that's going on up there, it's not stopping. It's continuing. And it's not just running in one direction. It's running this way and then back, this way and then back, breaking things as it goes, snapping branches. And again, I've never heard a stick break that sounds like that, like what was going on up there. These had to have been either very giant branches or trees, or some of the hardest wood that there is in the world. I don't know, but it just didn't sound like anything. As a kid, you break sticks over your leg and all that stuff, and never sounded like this. The trees, you could see the bushes and the brush physically moving in certain places, swaying side to side, shaking. And so we start moving quicker. I think, looking back on things, me and you touched on this a little bit.
Right. You moving forward.
We're moving forward still.
Right.
And people would say, well, why the heck would you continue going in that direction? And I think what Chris was thinking was, if we can round this corner and get on the back side of the left-hand ridge, now we have that between us and whatever's over there. And then we can turn and head back with that kind of separating us. I'm guessing, but it just, that to me makes sense, because it wasn't a whole lot further to round that corner. So we keep going. The noise continues. Then it kind of dies down a little bit as the ridge starts to slope down. And it slopes down on both sides of us as we round that corner that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When we round that corner, now there's a very wide open pine forest in front of us. And if you've ever seen a pine forest or cedar trees, like, they're not very bunched together. There's space between them. At least there was here. Mm-hmm. Where the ground is covered in all those pretty orange needles, and it's soft, and it was pretty open. There was some scattered brush, thicker brush and overgrowth in certain areas, but for the most part, you could see almost right through this whole place, except for the right hand side, which had, as that ridgeline came down, there was a clear division between where this pine forest started and where the rest of the forest was. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the forest, if you've been in the woods in New England, you know that there is just like a ton of briars, prickers, weeds, and just this, like, I don't even know how to just brush and bushes that, like, it's not pretty in a lot of places. It's very thick. Hard to get through, and so that's kind of what was over on the right hand side.
So it was super thick. You couldn't see through it. There was no silhouette or anything that you were seeing in the back part of those woods or anything.
No, nothing that I saw, and I highly doubt they did. I think if they did, what happens next probably wouldn't have happened. Right. So at that moment, in an instant, I mean, it happened so quickly. This thing stepped out from that wood line. There was a tree. It's like I'm not an arborist. I say this a lot because I'm not sure. I don't know my trees well, but it was a cedar or a pine. It's probably about maybe that big around. There was two of them, but they connected real low at the bottom, and there was a space in between them that was about that big. So when it stepped out, it stepped right behind that tree, but its face was in that space, and that space kind of got a little wider as the trees went up, because they start to protrude out more. So what we could see was basically from his male region. That's where basically it started. And then the trees came up and kind of framed him out to outside his shoulders and, whatever, the rest of his face.
So there was no question this was a male.
No question. He was fully erect.
Oh, interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
One of the first things that I noticed, that's embarrassing to say.
No,
but,
not at all.
It's weird. It's just weird. It's very strange. It didn't look like ours. A little bit, but not really. Looked different. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking at it because once your eyes see what is above that, that's all you can focus on.
Right.
And what was above that was a monster. As a 14-year-old kid, even having an affinity for these things, right, where you want to look at them in books, your whole world is flipped upside down when you're staring at something that's not supposed to be real. When you go to bed at night and you're scared to go to bed because you think there's something in your closet or underneath your bed or outside your window, and everybody tells you monsters don't exist. You don't have anything to worry about. And so when these things are drilled into you, this is what you know. I mean, deep in your core, this is what you believe. Even if you have that fear as a child, you believe what your parents tell you. You believe what your teachers tell you. So when you're looking at this thing in front of you that's only 60, 70 yards away or whatever it was, and it's a giant, and it's covered in hair, and it's angry, and it's nothing you've ever seen in your life. The feeling of the blood, this is like one of the things I remember the most. That feeling of the blood in your body just rushing to the surface of your skin, where you just get hot, and then you feel flushed and like out of it. That was the initial response that I had. Chris either had the gun out or took the gun out again. I think that he probably had it out still from before, or either just had his hand on it so that he could draw it in case something happened. That was when this thing got really mad. That was when there was a smaller tree next to that pine tree. It was about a 10-inch oak, or I don't know, something like that. It had gray bark on it. Mm-hmm. And he had his hand around it. He was swaying back and forth really slowly. And, since like as an adult, I know more now than I did then. And I've been able to do research on certain things. And Christopher Noel talks about like the autism aspect. And I've worked with autistic children before, and a lot of them do this rocking motion. For them, it's a comforting thing. This motion that this thing was doing looked very similar, but I can't imagine that what it was doing was trying to comfort itself. It just didn't seem that way. It was just very weird. So anyway, swaying back and forth, has its hand around that tree, and what I'm focused on now is the hand around the tree, because it's fully encompassed that thing, wrapped all the way around, fingers almost touching. They probably could in certain places touch each other. They were so thick and big, and the fingernails on this thing looked like they were made of like, I don't even know, like some thick acrylic. They just looked like so thick and dirty, and you could even see like crack in part of it. It looked like a crack in like the big middle finger. But the hand just was so big, man. Like I remember just focusing on how big this hand was. And he started shaking that tree with one arm and one hand, like it was like a baby swing. I mean, like, you would take a baby and push it like nothing. Like an 8-pound baby is nothing. Sorry about my cat. He does this every time I'm on the computer.
No.
So, and this is like a tree that's probably 40 feet tall. And it's just like rocking like it's in a hurricane, man. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. My dad at that point does the whole like reach back, push me behind him. Chris's son is behind him already. He was younger than me. He was about 9 or 10. He was a small kid. He had his head buried in Chris's butt and he was crying. I mean, like weeping, sobbing. He was terrified. And I mean, I was too, but I think I was just kind of in a state of shock at this point. What I can tell you is his face. He had a very short forehead. Not like weird short, but it just when I see pictures of them now, and they have these kind of really elongated conical heads. This was not like that. His forehead was short and it sloped backwards, it like slanted back. There wasn't a whole lot of hair on his head. It was pretty sparse. It did have a slight point to it, right in the middle, but it wasn't very elongated. It just like it was short, and came to a point. Very square, like forehead too. Like it was kind of boxy. If that makes any sense, the bone structure in this thing, everything was so exaggerated. The jaw, like when you see like superhero cartoons and they draw this like super exaggerated thick jaw, that's similar to what this thing had. Very high cheekbones that they were so pronounced. Deep set eyes with the thick brow ridge, like everybody talks about. It had a wide nose, but its features reminded me of a Native American for whatever reason. I think it was just like those very sharp features on the cheekbones, the jaw. It had these very almond-shaped eyes, native or almost Asian-looking, like no fold in the eyelid area that I could see anyway. I didn't really, at least I didn't focus on much of where the ears were. I feel like I remember seeing some, but I didn't focus on that. There was just way too much else going on. Its head was set down, like it was resting on its upper chest. The shoulders, the frame of the thing was so wide, but it wasn't very bulky muscles. It just, the bone structure, the frame was just very wide at the shoulders. The hair on them was thicker here. As it came down the arm and the bicep, as it started getting towards the elbow, it started to thin out. And then when it got down towards the wrist and the hand, it got thicker over the hand, and it actually like hung over part of the first set of knuckles, like you said, like a fringe almost. The arms were extremely long. The bicep area and the forearm area were exactly the same length. At least it looked like it anyway. There was no difference. You didn't have a shorter bicep, longer forearm, or vice versa. It just looked all the same. The muscle, if you swing a hammer often, there's this muscle right here on the top of your forearm that connects to your elbow and then your tricep. That muscle was like a mound. It was so pronounced. And then this part of the forearm, the front part, the definition in it was just it was crazy. You could see a fully noticeable tricep muscle that made a U shape. You know, everything about the muscles on this thing just screamed like dense, mature, developed muscle, if that makes any sense. Like if you've ever seen a bodybuilder, and I'm not saying it was muscular like a bodybuilder because it wasn't bulky, but you know that like if you lift weights, your muscles change the longer that you're doing it consistently. The density in them changes, the striations in them become more visible, and they get maturity, which means they look harder.
Right.
And that's what this looked like. It looked like, you know, even though they weren't bulky, it looked like this thing had been working out its entire life. And I don't know how long that was, but much more developed than a lot of human bodybuilders, at least the definition. It didn't have a really bulky chest. You could see the clear definition where the pecs were, but it wasn't very puffy. It had the V shape. It got slimmer as it went towards the waist. Wasn't a ton of hair on the chest. You could see through it to the skin. The muscles on the shoulders were very round, like cantaloupes. Just very, like, that was one thing I remember too. Like they just look so perfectly round. No lips, just a slit for a mouth. And then he was shaking that tree. He was swaying back and forth. He curled his lips back at one point, and you could see his teeth perfectly. I mean, like both sets perfectly. They were big, blocky. It reminded me of a horse. Just these giant, blocky teeth. A mouth that was so wide it looked like you could fit a softball in it without any problem. He stuck his tongue out like 3 or 4 times, and when he did, he tilted his head back, kept it there for a second, then tilted it forward, stuck it out, tilted it back, kept it there for a second, tilted it forward. He did that like 3 or 4 times. And then he threw his hand in the air and swung it down really hard like this. That was when Chris kind of was trying to tell my dad, like, we need to get out of here now. Before that could happen, though, he stepped just a bit out from behind that pine tree to where you could see his right leg. Yeah, his right leg. And the hair on the thigh was really thick. As it got towards the knee and the calf, it got more thin. The calf muscle on this thing was like nothing I've ever seen. It looked like somebody took a brick, like a big brick, and just shoved it under his skin. Like the outline of it was just so big, man. Like it stuck out. If you like looking from the front, the muscle of the calf stuck out both sides of the leg, probably a couple inches. No exaggeration.
Wow.
The thing that was weird, though, the legs looked strange to me. They just didn't look like they fit right. And looking back on it, I feel like the length of the the from the hip to the knee, what just didn't look quite long enough, and it made the whole lower body just look strange. Um, I didn't get a great look at his feet or anything like that, but just I remember that looking very weird to me, and it didn't look like it would work right, if that makes any sense. It just, I don't know. The biomechanics, like looking at it, just looked very strange, man. It didn't look like they were the proper length. So now we start to turn around. Well, we're kind of getting ready to do this. Chris is making sure that he's got his son. He picked him up at this point. His son had urinated on himself. Chris was picking his son up. As he did that, that's when, from the left-hand side, there was like a bunch of overgrowth and brush over there, just kind of a section of it. It wasn't like a whole tree line or covered in it, but there was a section of it. That was when the other one stepped out, and I didn't get as much of a look at this one because we were starting to hightail it out of there. But what I can tell you is it was a female. It was built completely different. It wasn't as defined muscularly. The hips were wider. It looked like she had probably given birth. She had breasts. They were kind of flat. And I don't know how to describe, like, just not
like she had nursed.
What's that?
Like she had nursed, probably.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Her shoulders weren't as wide, and she had her face, like, it just, to me, to this day, it screamed female. It just looked feminine, but she looked nothing like him. Nothing. Her head was way more conical. Her skin was a darker color. Her hair was a darker color. Her eyes were shaped differently. She did have a wide nose. She had a slit for her mouth. Beyond that, I didn't see a whole lot, because that was when we turned and started leaving. And the whole way out of there, we were followed in the tree line, in the bushes, off in the distance. You could hear the footsteps until we were about maybe, I don't know, maybe 50 yards, maybe 100 yards from the camp. Is probably when it stopped, somewhere in between there. But it was a pretty harrowing hike back, because it wasn't just like a quick 2-minute hike. This was like eight minutes trying to get back, even when we're rushing. You know what I mean? Probably took us 6 minutes to get back. And the whole time you're hearing whatever it was that you just encountered, probably, because that's what makes the most sense now, is shadowing you and ushering you out. And the thoughts that are going through your head are pure terror. It's like, you can't see it, you can hear it, you can't see it. And if it wants to, it could probably just hop out at any time and snatch us all up, and nobody would ever see us again. And as a kid at 14 years old, to try to wrap your brain around this giant monster covered in hair that's screaming at you. Oh, well, I didn't even say that. Yeah. At one point there, after he did the whole tongue thing, he let out a yell that just, it sounded like nothing I've ever, well, I mean, I've heard now things that's similar, but No animal on the planet sounds like that. It sounded like like there was two sounds happening at once, like this kind of guttural reverberation and then the scream all at the same time. And it was the loudest, the most nerve-wracking sound you've ever heard. I think at that point, if I didn't think it before, I think when that sound happened, I had probably convinced myself that I was not going to make it out of there. That whatever this was so angry at us for being in its home, or intruding on its land or something. Whatever we did, it was not happy at all. And that sound just sounded like I just felt like it was going to charge after that. It just seemed like the next logical thing that was going to happen, but it didn't. And then that was when the female came out, and then we kind of turned tail and went back. And luckily we made it. I have theories on why it happened, how it happened. Now, after kind of getting into the subject more as I got older and reading books and watching the shows and YouTube channels, I think that he gave us every sign for the 3 days that from the day we got there. He was giving us signs that he was there, that they were there. We just didn't know, because if you don't have an open mind, first of all, I think you have to have an open mind to be able to even accept something like this. But you're talking about like the mid 90s. I think as time's gone on, it's gotten more accepted. Still not where it needs to be, but more accepted. But mid 90s, two old school guys like that, they weren't going to know about these things. If they ever heard about them, I'm sure that they just ignored any kind of conversation about it. I know they did, because I know my dad. He wouldn't even give it a thought. He'd think you were crazy.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because, I mean, after the fact, I mean, what's the conversation that goes on when you guys get back to camp? I mean,
There was no conversation. The conversation was, we got back to camp and pack everything up and let's get the hell out of here as fast as we can. Okay. The wives were asking why, and the dads were saying, don't ask, and let's go. And that was the only conversation that was had. I don't know what Chris's family talked about on their ride home, but in our car, it was silent. There was no conversation.
Well, and that kind of plays into kind of where I wanted to go next a little bit with this, is because in spite of all that, and I want to thank you, number one, Kyle, for sharing that with us, because tonight I just sat back and let you go, because you were really back at that experience. I could tell, and you're bringing out details that we hadn't talked about. And in that instant, in that short amount of time, I think you mentioned that you said your world was turned upside down. Everything that you thought that you knew is gone. You're confronted with something that's not supposed to exist. You're seeing this behavior that's scaring the hell out of you. Mm-hmm. You're looking at your dad, who's your Superman. You're looking at a guy that's next to him that's military. His son's behind him crying. This, it is produced, what we had talked about with PTSD with you, and you've had to deal with that. And even in the face of all that, you've still been interested in this subject. It spurred you on to read more, to gather more information, but you didn't go back into the woods for a long time.
Yeah, long time. About 20 years, 21 years, maybe, something like that. So, yeah, it does. It turns your whole world upside down. You start to wonder, like, what to believe and who to trust, right? Because what they teach you in books, is that there's nothing out there that could possibly be like this thing. Your parents tell you that, teachers tell you that, church tells you that, and then there it is. So your whole belief system, you start to question it, and then you start to, well, at least I did. Then you start to think, like, well, how deep does this go? What else is there that they're trying to keep from you? Because if there's a monster, a giant monster, this thing was 8 feet tall, conservatively, maybe 9. I probably weighed in the neighborhood of between 600 and 700 pounds, I would guess. Just based on, like, my knowledge of animals now over the years, working with, both domesticated and wild, and knowing what bone structure and muscle density and kind of how to gauge that. If they're telling you that this thing's not out there, then how much else is being hidden? That's kind of what goes through your head. The PTSD was really kind of tough. It was like I had severe panic attacks for a number of years. Sometimes it would just happen out of nowhere. Once they started, there were certain things that could trigger them. Being in a dark area, and it could be a parking lot. If it was surrounded by a dark area that you couldn't see into, it was enough to make me panic. As a teenager, like, kids would have parties in the woods, right? Because it was a place to go that, seemed safe, that the cops weren't going to come to, and I was a social guy. Like, I wanted to be with my friends, but I didn't want to go to those parties. Not that I didn't want to. Like, I was adamant about not going. I couldn't. It was so incredibly hard to, like, even try to force myself to. And if I went, I would have to drink. I don't mean to talk about alcohol, but, like, this was a coping mechanism just to be there. Otherwise, I couldn't be. I had to go to counseling. I had nightmares. I had just an incredible fear of things that I couldn't see, because I think how this whole thing started was those things that happened, but we saw nothing. We couldn't see anything, and then the thing just kind of appeared out of nowhere.
Gotcha.
I mean, and it was right there the whole time. And I think that's where that fear of, like, not being able to see into those bushes over there, not being able to see into that alleyway, where those fears came from, I think was, because of that, because it was so close and we never saw it. But it lasted a long time. It was counseling. I mean, I was on medicine at certain points. I had panic attacks. What kind of started to change all that was I was in my, like, early to mid 20s, and I remember watching a show on TV, and it was, I believe, if I remember the name correctly, I believe it was called Bigfootville. It was like a hour and a half long kind of documentary about a town somewhere that had a number of Bigfoot sightings, and people would talk about theirs. And I remember watching it and thinking for like the first time, okay, like, you know, maybe we're not crazy, because you question it. You can't help it. You just question it. Even though there's a part of you that knows what you saw, because you've been programmed for so long that this isn't possible, you question yourself.
Yeah.
And so
That's not a good place to be.
no, it's not. It's a very mind-bending, confusing thing. And now imagine that on top of being a teenager. Like,
Right. Going through those types of things and challenges at that age.
there
Yeah.
was just, there was a lot, man. I was a mess. I really was. I was a mess. And now I can't tell people.
Right. You
I
can
can't,
talk to. Right.
I couldn't tell the counselor why I was having these issues. You know, I could talk about normal things, but I couldn't say, oh yeah, by the way, I saw a monster, because he's going to go, we need to put him in a jacket and you need to get him in a hospital. They're going to think I'm delusional.
Right.
So, you still had to live with it.
Yeah. And it's all on your own.
Right.
All internal.
Yeah, you're an island, man. You're an island all into yourself. And but that show was the first time that I kind of felt like, okay, there's people out there that are talking about this. I need to hear more. And so I started searching it out. I started trying to find other shows. Anytime there was a show on TV that mentioned anything about, like, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, or if there was a paranormal show where there might be something on that episode, I had to watch, because the more that I heard, the more that I felt like I wasn't alone, and that there had to be people out there that I could discuss this with. And it was kind of like a purging of it through osmosis, by watching these shows and listening to these people. I started to feel a little better, and then a little more, and then a little more. And then as time went on, I started to want to know more. I started to want to know what this is, how it's out there, how it stays hidden, how come people tell you that they're not real, how come we're being lied to, because we're being lied to.
Yeah.
Plain and simple, we're being lied to. There's no way in hell that the people in power don't know that they're there. There just isn't.
Right. There's been stories about that too, with the visits from three-letter agency people,
Yep.
and many things happening behind the scenes that affect people's status within their ability to bank, possibly have a job.
Yep.
So yeah, there's repercussions.
Yeah.
But Kyle, I again, and for people in chat, we've created a place to where hopefully people can come and share encounters like yours and feel comfortable to talk about the effect it's had on them. Because in spite of this, years of what you faced and had to deal with, in spite of that, now you've created an outlet for yourself to kind of further that awareness, so people don't have to deal with it or like you did, to feel like they're isolated. I mean, tell us a little bit about what kind of motivated you to, because you said you thought about a year maybe about putting a channel together. You'd had years to kind of come to grips with this. You had another encounter that we'll talk about here, but let's talk about kind of what spurred you into putting together a channel and then finally making that move after just thinking about it.
Yeah. So the very first time that I shared this was with Carrie. Well, actually, that's not completely true, but I mean to to the world, to a community, and that was not long ago. Um, I had kind of flirted with the idea of starting a channel because I thought like, well, if I start a channel, it'll give me an outlet where I can be around other like-minded people. I can create a place for them to come share their encounters. I can talk to people who are in this field who, I'll be able to pick their brains, learn from them, just kind of, a lot of things rolled into one. But the idea was it would be a place where people could feel safe. People could feel like they were part of a family. That was the atmosphere that I wanted to create. We were not. Nobody was a viewer. Nobody was a subscriber. We were friends. We were family. We were a community, and that was the most important thing for me from the beginning, because it wasn't about. It was about nothing else but uh, a um, a cathartic experience for people who needed it. It was a place for people to learn more um, from people who have been studying this stuff for a long time, and so that was the idea. I I always made an excuse as to why I didn't make it though, and then Kerry's show happened that month or month and a half leading up to that show, getting to know him, talking to him, picking his brain. Kerry was so selfless. He gave, and I don't know how he did it, because I just don't know how he had any free time.
I know.
I don't. It just baffles me still. But whatever he had, what little time he had, he made sure that if you needed or you wanted to talk to him, he was there. I just asked him a couple questions like, hey, can you tell me like how you started and when you started, what did you do to get people to understand that your intentions were pure and they weren't to be like a quote unquote YouTuber. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I think YouTube has a stigma where when people say, "Oh, you have a channel on YouTube," I think they usually think of like these vapid, like idiots who are out there making prank videos, or
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, and that was not anywhere near what I wanted to do, and that was not what Kerry was doing.
Exactly.
And so I picked his brain a little bit, and he just was so encouraging. He I remember before the show, he was telling me like, you need to do it. You just need to do it, bud. Like in that great melodic, soulful country voice of his. Um, he just, you need to do it, bud. You got something to share. You got something to give. And I didn't believe him. I mean, I did, but my personal stuff, like, my stuff didn't allow me to believe that I had anything to share. I was supposed to go back on that show. I was on Friday night. I was supposed to go back on Sunday. We spoke that Saturday. We spoke Sunday. He couldn't do the show because he had trouble at work.
Yeah.
And then Monday we talked briefly, and he said, I'm going to schedule you for, it was the 21st, when he got back from Florida. And I was like, all right, yeah, that's great. Whenever. I told him, don't worry about me. Deal with your work, go home. We'll catch up whenever you got free time. And then Tuesday morning, I woke up and I had a message box that was full of all these messages. And I don't use Facebook Messenger often.
Right.
Nobody messages me there. So I thought that was a little peculiar. And then obviously I found out the terrible news.
Yeah. Devastating.
My initial reaction was that I didn't believe it. There was something about Kerry. He was like a father figure. He had this aura about him that if he told you he believed in you, if he gave you a compliment, if you had the opportunity to talk to him and he said anything nice to you, it was the same type of feeling as if your dad was saying it to you. You just felt he was like a hug. He was like a walking hug. It was the only way I could describe him. He made you feel safe. He made you feel confident. He made you feel good. So it was very hard. He just was kind of larger than life for me. He was like a mentor for the brief time that I knew him. And he shared things, we shared normal stuff. We shared life stuff when we talked too. It wasn't just about YouTube,
Right.
Which was another amazing thing that, amazing character trait that he had. He was an open book. When that happened, for the first week or so, I felt like everybody else. I cried. I felt kind of bewildered, like this just can't be real.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for someone to tell you it's fake. You're questioning it, like how, why. I even have guilt to this day about being his last guest. I know that sounds crazy to some people, but it's like when you look up to somebody that way and something like this happens, I think to myself, like, who am I? I shouldn't have been his last guest. He should have had so many more, and he should have had so many more people who were better than me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, these are the thoughts and the feelings.
It's natural.
So for that first week, it was a lot of trying to reconcile these feelings and emotions, and just like everybody else. By the second week, I found myself sitting and going, every night I watch this show. Every night, no fail. And now I can't watch it. And I was looking for something to get my mind off of the fact that this guy that I looked up to, this guy that I watched for so many years, was no longer there anymore. And somebody who I thought was doing so much for this community and was going to continue to, he brought so many people together, and that was his gift.
Yep.
He brought people together who probably would never have been together if not for him.
Right. Right.
And so as I'm sitting there, I finally had this thought, like, now is the time to start the channel. And I have to say, like, last week, it was the first time I experienced trolls, and it was so venomous and it was so hurtful. It wasn't just a typical, like, oh, you're fat. Like, yeah, I know I'm fat. Like, whatever. Call me fat. I don't care. Like, that don't bother me. People questioned my motives. People said, terrible things that had to do with, the channel. I didn't start this channel to replace anybody, especially not Kerry.
No, irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable. I'm going to tell you right now, if that show still to this day, if that show's on, I won't put my show on. If I know it's going to be on, like Saturday, I would have had a show normally. I'm going on with Daniela because she asked me to come on, and I'll do it every single time. That show and him meant so much to me. And so as I sat there, sorry.
That's all right. It's all right, man. You're in a comfortable place, Kyle. Just let it out, man. That's why we're here. That's why we're all here. That's why, if you go back and you listen to that Sasquatch Chronicles when Kerry was on there, and then you listen to Kerry after he talked about how Wes talked to him and how Wes encouraged him to have a show to do that. Kerry was like, "What?" He was like,
Yeah,
you heard him talk about that.
of course.
So brother, you're right in the same spot. Same spot. I mean, that's the thing that he did is he spurred so many people to feel comfortable about it, to come out, to talk about it. And he wanted a community. He didn't want trolls. He didn't suffer trolls. Kicked them out. He wanted a safe space for people to be understood, to be loved, and to be cared about. And I mean, I think we all honor him by trying to. I think Diane Fowler just said it in the chat, to carry on what he had kind of spurred so many people to do, to so many people to come forward with. I mean, you can talk to Mark, you can talk to Larry, and they know a lot of the old timers. They know a lot of the scene the way it used to be. And it's the downside of this and the underbelly of what goes on. But that's not why we're here. We're not here to tear people down. We're here to lift people up, to share their stories, to build awareness, to let people be prepared, and to have a community that supports each other. So I mean, you're one of thousands of people that he touched, and there's so many people we probably have no idea who he touched and in what ways.
But what he did though, like this right here, me and you having this conversation, I don't think some people understand how special just this is.
Yep.
For somebody who's been through this is what I mean by like the connection, where he made people no longer afraid to speak their truth. And I'm not saying it was just him. There were others. But I think there was something about Kerry. Like there just was. And there's no denying that. So I wasn't trying to replace anybody. I never would. I look up to that man so much. Like, that wasn't my idea. My idea was, I need to start this channel. I need an outlet. I was upset. I was depressed. Yeah. I was finding myself kind of falling more and more into that hole that I'd been in before. And I thought to myself, how many other people are sitting on their couch right now feeling the same way?
Yeah.
Maybe I will be lucky enough to reach a handful of them. And if I do that, then just in doing that, I'll feel good, right? So I talk about this a lot. Like the most selfless acts are kind of selfish too, because when you're doing something for somebody else, it feels good to do that, right?
Yep.
And so I knew that if I could give somebody 4, 5 people, I thought if I had 10 subs at the end of a month, I would have been ecstatic. I don't know what the hell happened, and I don't know how it happened, but I am so incredibly grateful. There ain't even words that I can use to capture how much it means to me that so many people have come to the channel, and the messages and the comments and the emails. I try every day to answer every single one. And if that means I'm awake till 2 or 3 in the morning, so be it. Because like I said, they're my family. They're my community. They're my people. I'm one of them. I'm no different. No different. The thought of getting on this screen is so terrifying and so daunting. But these wonderful people like you, people like Mark, people like Daniela, people like Cashew, Uh, everybody in this feed, Night Wolf, these people that I see now 3 days a week, they make it so much easier. I'm having a bad day and I feel like crap, and then I think like I have this family here to go to at night, and it makes it so much better, man. It just sounds cheesy, maybe, I don't know, but
no, not at all. No, and you've said it. You've touched on it, I think, better than I've tried to communicate it, because I talk about community in the sense of this technology can really be a double-edged sword, and we can really do great things with it.
we sure can.
Things here like this in the moment, and this creativity of just normal people.
Yep.
Outside the system, outside whatever appears on media networks that is forced down, and
because this is real.
Right. Exactly.
This is organic. This is genuine. This is, this is not fakery. This is real.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no filters between it. There's no gatekeepers between it.
No, I've made real friends in such a short time. Real friends who, if they asked me to do anything to help them, I would at the drop of a hat.
Right.
And vice versa.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I've never come in contact with a much more giving community than I was introduced to and lucky enough to be accepted by than this, because
Amen.
Because you're sitting there and you feel isolated. I am interested in this subject. I don't have anybody to talk to about it. I told you about my best friend for 35 years and the person that stood up at my wedding. I go to tell him about going out to New Mexico and going to a Bigfoot conference, and his eyes get super wide, looking crazy. Sorry. But all the kids in the chat,
you're getting in trouble after the show.
You know what I'm saying. It just had to be said.
Right.
But now to use this technology to build these communities, to connect people together outside of what is mainstream, because it's real, is I couldn't have put it better. God, Kyle, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing all that with us.
Well, thank you for having me. Like you said, when you reached out and you said somebody canceled it last minute, wasn't even a thought. If there are bad people, but the good ones, the good ones, I'll stick my neck out for every time.
Yeah. Well, so with that in mind, with your channel, you're growing.
Yeah.
You've got opportunities to make that your own. I hear the music coming on. I don't know if Mark's going to cut us off or not. We're going to keep going as much as we can here until the feed runs out. So,
oh man, that was a fast hour and a half.
Yeah, I know. Well, we usually go maybe an extra 10 minutes possibly or so. But what I wanted to touch on and make sure is everybody goes over to your channel, subs. But the next area I wanted to try to hit on would have been the Bridgewater Triangle. And if we're going to get cut off here pretty quick,
I'll squeeze it in as fast as I can.
Well, I think Mark's got a little bit of control on that. I think sometimes he puts it in as far as how much more time will actually be left. I don't know if they pre-program that or not. But you had an experience in the Bridgewater Triangle, which has its own history of a lot of strange goings on. Let's put it that way. Many, many years back to where I think you mentioned that there was artifacts that were 9,000 years old that had been found there.
Yeah.
So this is an area in Connecticut.
Massachusetts.
Oh, sorry. Massachusetts. You're right. 200 miles or so area. And the lights have been seen there. I think fairies have been seen there. Little people possibly. Lots of strange goings on. But how did you end up there and having this experience, seeing a Bigfoot kind of do some very acrobatic movements. Let's say that.
Yeah, so it is a very, very weird area. It has a lot of history, like we talked about. New England itself is the oldest settled area in the United States. And so there's a lot of places in New England that are strange. When you have all that time for different energies to kind of make their appearances and leave their imprints, these things can happen. So the Bridgewater Triangle is 200 square miles in southeastern Massachusetts. I believe the 3 points that connect the triangle are Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth. I believe. I'm pretty sure. There are a lot of other towns that it kind of runs through at certain points and that surround it. It was inhabited by the indigenous people and the Native Americans before the European colonists came. The Native Americans inside the Bridgewater Triangle, there's the Hockomock Swamp. I think it's the Hockomock Swamp Wildlife Management Area, I think is what it's called. That swamp to the natives was seen as a very spiritual place. There's been many artifacts found there. I believe there was that swamp was used as a burial site for the natives for at least a little bit of time. I think it was the Wampanoag tribe is who was there. Pretty sure anyway. But the tales go back probably 100. Lauren Coleman, if you know who that is, his book that he wrote in the 70s, he's the one who coined the term, the Bridgewater Triangle.
Oh, yeah? Yes,
he's the first one to coin that term. I forget the name of the book, but it's a good book. It talks a lot about, some of the goings on there. But the tales are everything from hauntings to ghost lights or orbs, UFOs and aliens, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, hairy man, wild man, forest giant, whatever you want to call them. Puck wudgies. You've probably never heard that term before, have you?
No, I think I heard that actually Duke, I think on his show on what Bigfoot Outlaw, or no, it's what is it? Bigfoot World Bigfoot Radio.
Yeah, puck wudgies. That's the thing. These things are nasty little buggers, I guess. You're supposed to bring them gifts and I don't know. They can do some damage apparently. But there's certain places that they appear and that they tend to stick to, and parts of the triangle. There's a couple places there that they apparently have, it's where they kind of hang out or where they appear or where they do their little damage. But there's just been everything, whatever kind of weird thing you can think of, there's probably a story about it coming out of the Bridgewater Triangle. So that was why
you were out there.
That was why I was there. I mean, also it's a really beautiful area. It's just a really nice place to walk around. It's the swamp, and then the woods. It's just pretty there. But I was there because I wanted to see if there was some weird stuff going on, and it didn't happen right away.
Right. And this is after you'd gotten comfortable again with being back in the woods. So this
is 21 years since the encounter. This is 21 years later. Actually, no, this is 25 years later. So I had been going back into the woods for another 4 years at this point.
Okay. So what you were there, you were checking things out, looking for weirdness.
Yeah, and I had seen at this point I had seen orbs a few times. I'd seen what I thought could possibly be a UFO type object in the sky. It was, it was moving. It was flashing different colors. It moved very strangely, but I can't say for sure. But made sense. That's probably what it was. I'd heard whispering. I had even heard what I thought was a woman singing at one point. And then I've also heard what sounded like drums and chanting.
Gotcha.
All at different times. So on this day, I've been there for probably about 2 or 3 hours. Had made my way through the swamp area, and
Everybody
no, I had a friend with me.
Okay.
I had a friend with me, good friend with me.
Go ahead.
So I stopped to, I had to use the restroom, basically. And when you're out there, you have to use whatever trees or bushes are around. So I stopped to do that. When I turned around, now I was in the middle of the woods. I wasn't on a trail. I had walked into the woods to do this. There are many trails there and places to walk safely. But I walked into the woods to do this. My friend came because he had to go too, but so he was probably about maybe 10 feet to my left.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a pretty thick brush kind of all over the place, but there was I describe it like an alleyway. You could see straight through for about 150 yards. And then you can't see anymore because there's more trees and more brush and stuff. But this was kind of a very open area in the mix of all this. So I get done doing what I'm doing, turn around, and that's where this area is. As I'm turning, I think I'm seeing something. I think, but it was kind of this like, boom. It was. As I'm moving, I thought I saw it. So then I stop and turn back. It's a decent distance away. Maybe 100 yards, maybe 80 yards, something like that. So I start walking towards it because I admittedly don't have as good a vision as I used to.
We all don't.
Yeah. Don't even ask me about my hearing. Good God.
What?
You almost got me. So I start walking towards it. I cover about 20 or 30 yards, and that's when it really came into view. And it was like if I hadn't just gone to the bathroom, I would have gone at that moment. So what I see now is it's gray in color. It's got its arms and its legs out to the sides. It's holding itself up on its fingertips and its toes. And it does this scurry like a cockroach or a spider, but it moved so quick. It was the strangest, most unnatural, unnerving position for it to be in. And then the way that it moved just seemed like something out of a nightmare, something out of I don't know if you ever see I forget what movie it is. It's a horror movie. The girl, it's like a little girl, and she flips herself into a bridge, and then she scurries towards the camera. Right. That's what it reminded me of. I think it might be The Ring is the movie I'm thinking of. But that's what it reminded me.
So almost like insect type movements in the quickness. Is it
yes.
Now hang on to that thought for a minute, because I know earlier when you were talking about seeing that other figure, beast, whatever you want to call it, step out between that tree, and you said it kind of moved his head back and moved his tongue and moved it, kind of moved around a little bit and shook that tree. What were the movements in comparison to what you saw with this one in kind of the crawling position versus those head movements that you saw of that first encounter? And it just
Much different.
okay,
Much different.
go back to the spider though. Back to the spider crawl.
So this thing scurries like an insect, just very quick, very like twitchy, and it seems just so unreal because I can tell that it's massive. So how is it moving like this? Kind of like just with its little fingertips and arm. It's so unnatural.
Was it on a flat surface? Was it in?
It was flat.
Tree?
It was flat. Yeah, it was completely flat. It was a leaf littered forest floor. No rocks or anything around that I could see anyway.
What time of day?
It was about 3 maybe in the afternoon. It's perfectly sunny out.
Okay.
What's that?
It was gray, and you saw it crawling.
Yep.
Okay.
And then in one like smooth fluid, another just very strange motion. It went from this where it's all spread out.
And you're talking about spread out, like not close here with hands like this, but
no,
all the way out, extended to the side, straight out from the shoulder. Okay.
Yes. So like if you've ever seen somebody try to do those I forget what they call, like it's like a wide set push up.
Right. Yep.
Like that, basically.
Okay.
But I could see the feet too were flexed in the middle.
At the mid-tarsal break.
You could clearly see it. Okay. It was so apparent that they were flexed right in the middle, where where they say there's this mid-tarsal break. It went from that position in one smooth fluid motion to standing straight up. And I mean, like as if somebody stuck their hand into a puppet and just went like this and raised that puppet up. It just went, and it was on its feet.
Did it look like it pushed off at all? Did it seem like it used its feet to bring itself upright, or what?
That's the thing, man. Is it didn't look like it tried anything. It just looked like it did it. Oof. If that makes any sense, it just looked like it did it. It didn't try. It just went, shoo, and it was up.
Wow. Almost like the strength from the toes and the fingers popping itself back up,
popped it right up.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's the only thing I could think of. I kind of likened it to like if somebody had a marionette, it was on strings and they just kind of tugged it and up it went. So now it's vertical. And now you see just how big this thing is. The first one, this thing eclipses that thing by probably double its weight. If that was 600 pounds, this is 1,200. And it's got to be 10 feet tall. Talking to some people like in this field, they seem to think that what I'm saying is probably a little conservative. They're saying, just from what they know and from how I describe it all, they would say you probably saw one that was between 10 and 12 feet tall and somewhere between 12 and 1,400 pounds. Which if you try to think about what that looks like in your head, if you've ever played basketball on a regulation basketball hoop, the rim is 10 feet high.
Yep.
Stand under that and look up. You're looking straight up. I mean, 10 feet is huge.
Right.
It is a true giant. He was way, way, way more big and muscular. I feel like he was definitely old. He had scars on him. His skin looked very leathery and weathered. His face looked very like weathered and tired.
Oh yeah.
Yes. His eyes, though, totally different than the first one. They looked very gentle. And the feeling that you had when this thing was horror movie crawling is gone, and it went away in an instant. And the only way I can describe it is there was no words spoken. I didn't hear any mind speak that people talk about, but I felt like it was trying to convey something to me. And what that felt like was this kind of warm, soothing, like, you don't have to worry. That's just what it felt like. And this only lasted probably 20 or 30 seconds, the whole thing. And then he stepped off into the woods and was gone. And it's silent, completely silent. I didn't hear anything. Didn't hear any footsteps. Two strides, and there was no sign of it anymore. I could not see it.
You had mentioned that the other one you saw, you'd seen a little bit of facial hair. It's gotten a little bit thin. The facial features and the hair on this, or the skin color on this one, what was that like? Facial features and skin tone.
So the skin was like a dark gray, like almost like a leather jacket. I saw whites in his eyes, just in the corners though, just very little in the corners. The eyes were gigantic. They were just so big, man, and they were much more round than the other one's eyes. He had a very conical head.
Oh,
and
yeah?
it dude, when I tell you, its head was the size of like a totem, like a truck tire. I don't know how to even describe how big this head was. Like, it was like, just shouldn't be. Like, it just shouldn't be. It was just huge. Like, if you came across a totem pole, a full-size totem pole, like with a Sasquatch head carved in it, I would imagine that it would be comparable to that. It was huge. It was just massive. Like I said, gray in color, scar on the upper right side of his chest, another scar down by his ribs. There was one kind of on the shoulder as he turned to walk away. It looked like there was hair missing. But other than that, I wasn't a whole lot that I didn't get as much detail as I did with the first one. It was much quicker.
Right. Well, we did have, I know we've got to run over our hour and a half here, but there was a question in chat, I think, that somebody had put in here. I think Larry had put it up for me, that had asked, I think it was Cryptic Crystal.
Oh, hey, Crystal. I know Crystal.
It says, do you have any footage of your own, video, audio pics? Do you research any specific areas at all?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm trying to work on right now, getting onto the channel, and I'm going to be doing a lot more of the in the field stuff. I have video of places that I research around here. So I go to the Mashantucket tribal land.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have. There's some land that they will allow outsiders on. There's a lot of land that they won't. You have to get permission, but I have permission to go on some of that land, and I've been on it many times. There's some stuff there, but it kind of is sporadic. I also, so I shared this on the channel. I reached out to Mark Zaski because he talks about his formula that he thinks that he could probably pinpoint any area in any state where these things would be. And so I said, can you help me? Can you, if I show you an area, can you maybe narrow it down for me where the best place would be for me to look?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Mark said, give me what you got. So I sent him a 100 square mile map of areas around me. Mark sent me back to smaller areas, much smaller.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, the very first day, and I only went for like a quick recon. This was not like an in-depth investigation. This was like a 45-minute walkthrough, see if I saw anything. The very first day I went in there, stick structures, tree break and twists 8 to 9 feet high, all pointing in the same direction, all kind of spread apart. And now I don't put a ton of validity into that stuff, but when it's in an area where there's other things and they're all pointing in the same direction and they're all twisted, I got to put something into it. A giant teepee, I mean giant. When I stood inside this thing, there was 20 feet above my head.
Holy
of
mackerel.
space. It was huge. I have pictures of this stuff. I've shared them with Mark, actually. He yeah. Just last week in that park, on the Bigfoot Mapping Project website, there was a Bigfoot sighting in that park.
I'll be dang.
Ain't that something? So that's a place that I'm going to be going regularly, because that's like 35 minutes from me.
Perfect.
But Chris Reinhardt from Discover Sasquatch.
Right. Right.
He's a friend. He lives in Connecticut, total opposite side. He lives northwest. I live southeast, about an hour and a half from me. But he's invited me up to go do research with him. On a pretty regular basis. I'm going to do that.
Awesome.
I'm also going to do that with Christopher Noel in Vermont, another wonderful researcher. So yes, I have stuff. I don't have anything great from this area. There's some stuff that, I even will debate. But there's some stuff that I think is really good. And I think what Chris has going on in his area in Connecticut is awesome. So there will be a lot more, I promise.
So you'll have some content on your channel.
I will, yeah. And I'm trying to learn how to edit too. That's the other thing. Like,
oh my gosh, we kind of skipped over that part, and I don't think we've got time to go into everything that each of us
what a nightmare
learning in trying to put up these channels. I'm lucky to have Sawdust behind me and another crew of good mods. Well, we're gonna wrap things up, Kyle. I can't express how appreciative I am for you coming on, and we'll have you on again because there's some other things I'd like to get into with the Bridgewater Triangle. But is there anything else you want to add, or anybody you want to say hi to, or anything you want to leave our audience with tonight?
I want to say hi to my nephew Jackson, my niece Savannah, and my little baby nephew Baylor. Jackson is a huge fan of YouTube Bigfoot shows, and he will 100% watch this episode. So I wanted to give him a shout out.
All right, Kyle, I appreciate you for coming on and hang out backstage for a second, because Mark and I want to wrap with you in a second. I cannot. I mean, forever. I owe you.
No, you don't. You don't owe me nothing.
No, seriously, I do.
You don't owe me nothing, brother.
Well,
we're family.
I got some Kansas City barbecue if you want some.
Woo, I'll take it.
Well, all right. You can go ahead and jump off if you want here and jump backstage, and I'll say bye to the audience, and I'll be with you in a sec.
All right, brother.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, footers, that was awesome. Went over a half hour. Hopefully Larry's still awake. But I appreciate you guys for all hanging out, and I hope you can share this with some people, especially where Kyle's talking about community and what he wants to do with this channel. That's a reflection, I think, of what we're all here for. A lot of like-minded individuals. So Everybody get out in the woods, stay safe, and be aware of your surroundings. Night, night, footers. This was the late show, or this was the after hours. Have a great.
This has been a Sawdust production.